Hey, what's up guys? It's Robert Rule of 2 Review, and today, how about dem Titanfall graphics? Alrighty, well, as you have no doubt guessed, today is a pretty big day. It is Monday, March 10th, and tonight at midnight is the launch of two of the year's biggest and most anticipated games, and two of my most anticipated games. The first, which is the one that I admittedly am more excited about but really won't be talking about on this video, is Dark Souls 2. Holy crap, I hope that you are as excited as I am, and I know that this game is going to be a big mega smash. There's a lot of hype leading up to this game, which is good because the last two games only slowly built on their hype after they were released. This is the first time we have hype for a game, massive hype, I would say, before the game is launched. So awesome, way to go From Software. Can't wait for Dark Souls 2. Gonna be awesome. The other game, of course, which is what I'm gonna be spending this video talking about, is the one and only Titanfall. Finally, that game is gonna come out and we're gonna get it in our hands. It is the game that I'm gonna be buying an Xbox One for probably maybe this coming weekend. Sometime in the next week or two, I'll finally have it. And it should be noted that I do have a PC, a gaming PC that I use for a lot of gaming purposes, and I know that a lot of people may prefer to play this game on the PC. I, however, am not, mostly because I need a reason to buy an Xbox One. The game looks great. I can't wait to play it. And I think that it's probably going to be more optimal on my Xbox One than it's going to be on my PC as it is right now. I will be investing to upgrade my PC very soon, but not quite yet. So I'm probably going to be getting the Xbox One version of the game. That aside, it doesn't matter. It's still the same game on those two platforms. The Xbox 360 version, I think, is in another 2 weeks or so. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and what that game really is like. But regardless of that, tonight is the night Titanfall finally comes out. It's a big deal. One of the biggest games of the entire year. One of the few really big games for the Xbox One so far, and probably, as myself am a complete indicator of, it's going to be the game that sells a lot of people on Xbox One, considering it's one of the three versions out there, and it's exclusive to the PC and Microsoft platforms, not for Sony or Nintendo. So, I'm really happy and proud to be buying an Xbox One for this game in the next coming week or so. It's going to be pretty sweet. Now, the reason I'm actually talking about Titanfall is beyond the excitement for both that and Dark Souls 2, is the fact that there was just a really interesting article that I read on IGN talking about the resolution and the graphics for the game. That's a big conversation, an important one for a few reasons, lending to both the next-gen conversation, the competition, between Microsoft and Sony very directly, what it means for the game, and if that's going to affect how the game is received by gamers and perceived within the industry, and all sorts of good things. So I'm going to kind of touch on a few of those topics. Okay, so apparently the nature of this article and this information coming out, which isn't really the biggest deal, but like I said, there's a few different things that I took away from it that made me want to kind of touch on it for a video today, I'll get into the details. Apparently, the game during its beta period over the last week or a few weeks or month or so has apparently been running in 792p resolution. Okay, I am not the most tech-savvy guy in the world, so forgive me for any of you out there who are and really understand this more than I do. I didn't even know 792 was possible. I didn't even know it was a thing. I mean, I guess apparently what I'm learning through this is that any number between 0 and 1080 apparently is a possible resolution, whether it's progressive or interlaced. And hey, that's new news to me, but whatever. So 792 is a thing. That's what it's been running at for the beta. And apparently it's going to be launching tonight. The Xbox One version, let me get a little bit more specific, not the PC version. The Xbox One version is going to be launching also at 792. And the thing is, it may be increased somewhere down the line. There's some interesting statements from some of the folks from Respawn who worked on the game, and their response to the resolution issue, which has become a much larger conversation for the Xbox One since its launch, mostly because a lot of the games that have come out for the Xbox One have also come out for the PlayStation 4, and there's been varying resolutions and frame rates between the two, and I think almost exclusively everything is running and looking better on the PlayStation 4 than the Xbox One. So it's kind of created this whole different topic that people are talking about when talking about the Xbox One specifically, and more importantly, the next-gen conversation and comparing it directly to the PlayStation 4. So what somebody from Respawn said, and I don't have his name in front of me, but he talked about, experimenting with different levels of resolution for the game and what they're trying to do, at least initially for launch. And something interesting he mentioned was, this is a direct quote, the target is either 1080p non-anti-aliased or 900p with FXAA. I don't know what that means. I assume the AA also means anti-aliasing in that acronym of 4 letters FXAA. But you can gather from the quote what that means. 1080p without anti-aliasing, or 900p basically with anti-aliasing. For anyone who doesn't know what anti-aliasing is, again, I only know so much, but what I do know is the result. And the result of anti-aliased means that it kind of smooths out the edges and the corners of all the textures of everything you're looking at. So if you think of like the character model for Kratos, for example, just because that's probably easy to envision in your head, you're looking at Kratos in a game, and without anti-aliasing, he will look kind of like blocky and choppy, and like the edges might be a little bit more kind of blocked out, and like, sharper angles, going around the form of his body and the polygons that are making up the resolution of what you're looking at on his model. When you give it anti-aliasing, I don't even know if that's how you say that, or if you anti-alias it or give it anti-aliasing, whatever. If you do that to it, if you have anti-aliasing, it's going to smooth out the entire texture, the entire model itself. All the edges at the very edge of his body and his head, as you're looking around him, it looks smoother, more pleasing to the eye, more natural. It's an effect that's more taxing on the system. The more powerful your hardware, the better your anti-aliasing can be, which means the better the textures, the world around you, the characters that you're looking at and playing as are going to look. So it's a good thing. When you have anti-aliasing, it's making everything look better. And so when you consider that obviously they're looking at 2 different ways to make the resolution end up in this game, initially and long term, obviously you're going to have people on a lot of different sides of the fence. The higher resolution in the sense that it's going to be 1080p, but you're not going to have that anti-aliasing. So a lot of the textures and the models and everything for everything you see, again, the human characters, the Titan mechs, and the crazy detailed rubble-filled world around you, it's going to look not as sharp, not as smooth without that. But they, of course, could bring the resolution down from 1080p to 900p and then give it that anti-aliasing. So it's kind of a sticky scenario, and especially for myself to discuss, because, again, I only understand these details so much, But I don't know what the better option of those two is. I just don't know if when you remove the anti-aliasing but up the resolution, does that ultimately give you a similar quality of effect as bringing the resolution down a little bit but adding that anti-aliasing? They kind of seems like they might balance each other out. There's also something to the effect of, now myself personally, I've been gaming for 30 years, so I've noticed the differences in some things. And I can tell you that from just my personal experience and maybe the way I analyze this kind of stuff, the difference in resolution, speaking specifically if you were looking at something in 900p and something in 1080p, I can tell you that the difference, it can be noticeable if you're really, really looking for it. Sure, I mean, it's there, but ultimately, it's not that much of a difference. It's like so minute. I myself don't even know if I would ever really care on the difference. I mean, even notice if it would make an impact on the game. Now, anti-aliasing, I can tell you that is something that to me is a much bigger and more obvious and impactful difference. So again, for me personally, you may disagree, but that's what I've noticed in my life, and that's how I prefer things. So if I was going to pick a higher resolution or anti-aliasing personally, I would probably go with the anti-aliasing because I've seen it make a bigger difference. Like I said, a bigger impact on how the game looks and how smooth it can feel to play. It's a prettier, more eye-pleasing effect to see that happen than to see this difference in only, 180p, 180 progressives, whatever that term would be. I don't really care as much about that personally. However, thinking of the broader gaming public, it's a big deal. This graphics conversation, especially with this new generation, it's a big deal. People really, really have a lot to say on it. People take it very personally. They have intimate feelings on this matters, this doesn't matter, graphics this, graphics that. Mostly because what we're doing nowadays is comparing the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. The Wii U, which is a very powerful next-gen system in its own right, isn't really part of the specific conversation. And I actually think Nintendo wants to be there. So personally, I'm okay with it. As a huge Wii U fan, I think that that's fine. I know that games look great on that, and they're going to be looking great coming out for the rest of the year, so that's great. It's kind of smart. Nintendo doesn't have to be part of this whole battle between like, oh, my P is a little bit better than your P and whatever, as silly as that sounds, So when talking about this in general, the gaming public looks at these conversations and it's a big deal. And people use it to compare because we have to fight about these things for some reason, to compare my system is better than your system because this is better and that's not as good on your system and yada yada. Sadly, the Xbox is losing this battle, like I said, almost 100% because all the stuff that's coming out for the system, which looks great in and of itself, is not up to the same standards of things that are coming out on the PlayStation 4. It seems like the PlayStation 4 is the less expensive but more powerful unit between the two. So even though there's really not a lot of exciting games for the PlayStation 4 right now, kudos, man. Sony knocked it out of the park. And it's why I love Sony. I love Sony to death. And I can't wait for them to finally sell me a PlayStation 4 because that's going to be a freaking awesome machine once games start coming out for it. And I feel the same way about the Xbox Ones, So here's the thing. Something else that they mentioned in this is the idea of course, improving the resolution down the road. They're going to be able to patch this. They're going to be able to fix the details that aren't really quite living up to the standards that they want. It's launching at, again, we just talked about the 1080p and the 900p, but again, it's only launching at 792. I don't know what that's really going to look like or how that's going to impact the game's look, and how people are going to feel about it. I have a feeling that people are probably going to make it a pretty big deal. I have never seen anything that is officially in 792p. I guess since it's probably the next week or so, like I said, I'm hoping to get my copy in my Xbox. I guess I'll probably at that point still be seeing. I assume it's going to be a while before they're able to improve exactly what this resolution is going to be. So of course, down the road, they want to improve it from 792 to one of these other two, the 900p with anti-aliasing or the 1080p without it. And so the conversation that this made me really think of, and although I've tangented, this is really the reason I wanted to bring it up on today's video, is that, they have the ability to fix these things. And is that a good or a bad thing? Now I'm getting into this whole philosophical thing that is not even related to Titanfall, but it's interesting when you think about, they can release basically a version of the game that it sounds like they don't want to release. I'm sure that Respawn isn't thrilled that they have to release the 792p version of their biggest game for the Xbox in 2014, where these things are very important to how we talk about and analyze our video games. 10 years ago, no one would have really given the kind of a shit to make a big deal about it. But nowadays, with this new generation just a year old, 792p compared to 1080p, it's a big deal. People are going to talk about it. It's why there's an article on IGN, and it's why I'm coming to you on my video today to talk about it. So they don't want to release probably a 792p version, but they have no choice because that's just where they are at the developmental stage of Titanfall, releasing it on March 11th, 2014. At the end of the day, personally, my whole personal thing is I just don't really care if it's the game that I want, which Titanfall is a game that I want. I can't wait to get it, whether it's 792p or 1080p. Like, it's fine. Yes, I always want it to be the most efficient, maxed out version, the version that the developer envisions it being. I want it to be that, but they're not able to do it. They're releasing it at 792. That's fine. Like, I can deal with it. But the problem is, I do still have, from my own personal principle, I do have a problem with the fact that they're at the point where they're releasing basically the incomplete, unfinished version of their game, the version they would probably not want to release. But then does it become a benefit that we live in a world where, of course, they can fix that down the road? So that's kind of the nature of the conversation, Either we can release unfinished product nowadays because we have the ability to fix it down the road, or we wait and we wait and we wait and we get the version that we know that they want to release only way, much farther down the road, which is what like some companies like Nintendo and Blizzard and stuff seem to do. And what is the better option between the two? That's really the tough thing. And it's kind of something that really everyone has to answer for themselves. And I don't even know if I have a direct answer, because I appreciate that maybe Zelda takes forever to come out, but at the same time, when it finally does release, it is the best version it could possibly be, and it's always the best game of that year, and it's always the best game like almost ever made, and that's great. Same with Blizzard stuff. They took 12 years or whatever to release StarCraft 2, but when it finally came out, it was badass. It was what it needed to be. Same with Diablo, And those are just two companies that are just quick, easy examples, So I appreciate when it takes forever for a game to come out, but then it's as good as it needs to be. Miyamoto has the very famous quote that I'm going to have to paraphrase because I don't know it word for word, but he says, a bad game when it's released is, or no, he says, a delayed game is delayed, but it's great when it comes out, but a bad game is bad forever. Something like that. Like something to that effect. And it's a very powerful quote, and it's 110% true. I believe in that theory 100%, but at the same time, it's cool to know that a game could come out that's really exciting that we all want and that I want, like Titanfall. I know I can get it tomorrow if I want it, and I can start playing it. And it's probably still going to be pretty darn good, but it's not the real version that the developer wanted to release, but at least I know that down the road, in the next few weeks or months, hopefully, they can fix the things about the game that isn't perfect right off the bat, but we can still get it to play earlier. And that's a different kind of advantage. And so I kind of appreciate both respects. Ultimately, in a perfect world, everyone completes the game, releases the best possible version, and it's out, and they don't have to do any freaking maintenance down the road. It's kind of a silly thing to have to do when you really think about it. But like I said, they both have their advantages, and I'm okay either way. And so in wrapping up today's video, I want to touch on something that kind of relates to the last video I made about Watch Dogs and the potential of whether or not they downgraded the graphics or not. That was kind of a hot button topic, it seems. Like it's one of the few videos that I've released that, some people seem to not super be thrilled on. Not everyone really agreed with me, and it seemed like I was kind of being mean to people, or I was just basically wrong, which is fine. That's how opinions work. I have no problem with that. But it's funny how this situation kind of relates to that, in the sense that, the thought that I want to leave you on when it comes to this whole thing with Titanfall, with the graphics specifically of Titanfall, is that I still, at the end of the day, I don't think that it needs to matter. I know it matters in the sense that Titanfall is a beautiful looking game, and we love beautiful looking games. I also love beautiful looking games. Part of the reason I'm excited for it is to get an Xbox and get this game that is going to really showcase the power of this next gen machine, what the Xbox One can do. And I'm excited to have a gorgeous, amazing looking game to play and to show off to friends and to hopefully get immersed in, because, the good graphics along with good gameplay are going to help it feel that much better. Sure. But what we're talking about here, 792p, 900p, 1080p, anti-alias, not anti-aliased, all that's the whole conversation. To me, although yes, they make differences here and there, at the end of the day, I don't think that this is going to be an unpretty looking game. This game looks gorgeous regardless. I've seen videos in different resolutions streaming on the internet for the last year, almost year, I guess, 8-9 months since E3, and it looks awesome. The game just looks badass, and I think it's going to look badass on my big TV once it's finally running, and on your TV once it's finally running. Whatever we're doing with it, I think it's going to look good. They are talking about how they're going to slowly improve the graphics, down the road, the resolution, I should say, down the road, with updates and patches. That's going to be great. That's going to give us the slightly better looking version of an already gorgeous game. So I just hope that people don't really turn this into a bigger conversation than it needs to be. They probably will. That's okay. But I just don't think it needs to be. I think that what we have is a game that's going to play amazingly. It's going to review and sell like crazy. It's going to help Microsoft out of the slump they're going through and get the Xbox One selling a little bit better. And it's going to be gorgeous. It's going to be a really pretty game. Trust me, you're going to get this game home, even at 792p, even if it stays at 900p, and you're going to love it. You're going to say, hey, this game is so pretty. It looks amazing. Look at this engine. It's doing everything that we want the next-gen engines to do. And I think that we're all going to be big fans of Titanfall. And when it comes to Titanfall 2, it could hopefully even be better, especially because that one has the very likely possibility of jumping also to the PlayStation 4, and in which case it should probably run and look a little bit better, console-wise. PC, of course, is its own different beast. I'm going to reiterate that what we were talking about today was specifically the Xbox One version. I don't think any of these graphical issues exist with the PC versions, because maxed out PCs can run it exactly how they're designed to do. A little bit different when it comes to the console space. It's limited by what the console makes available. So, that's it. I definitely think that it's going to be a pretty game, and I hope that you guys agree. And at the end of the day, I hope it's as awesome as we all want it to be. Alrighty, guys. Well, that's it for the Titanfall and Dark Souls 2 excitement for today, as well as the graphics conversation. Of course, if you like what I'm doing and you like Rule of 2 Review, please feel free to subscribe, like, and share the video, and share your comments and your thoughts below. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.